CEOs of the various creative industry information to witness this particular, uh, you know, um, courtesy visit. Um, my understanding of the Freedom Online Coalition is that is what I say is a coalition of a body of countries like-minded and whose objective is actually human rights, privacy, security, and trust. And this, as of today, there are about 31 members, and only 3 so far from Africa. That's Kenya, I think Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, and I think Tunisia. Um, I don't know what yardstick was used to describe Nigeria as not a like-minded country. I think the ambassador will have to explain to us. But when I look at the objectives of the FOC, I think you've come to preach to the converted already. When it comes to innovation, this administration, and I'm glad that the ambassador has also confirmed that when it comes to innovation, Nigeria is probably the African hub for innovation. And this is not by accident. This is one because we have we have a pool of very young, talented, and ambitious young people in Nigeria. And I think as recently as 3 months ago in Dubai, the Nigerians came first in the area of innovation. And we intend to push this because when you look at the creative industry in particular, which is the fastest growing part of the economy and which employs the second largest number of people after agriculture, you can see why innovation and technology is very important to this administration. And we have put together legislation and other incentives to encourage young men and women in innovative technology. Now, I know that the ambassador said whatever is not tolerated, offline should not be tolerated online. And that's why the issue of human rights have come. But I think for us in Nigeria, human rights, respect for human rights is a cardinal principle of not just our constitution, but of day-to-day governance. And I'm yet to see any country with the kind of population we have, with the kind of multi-values, multi-culture, multi-religion, that has at the same time striving to balance, national security with freedom of the press and freedom of the media. I make bold to say that this administration in particular has no intention and does not tamper with the freedom of speech or freedom of individuals. But more often than not, we do confuse activists and politicians. We confuse them with journalists. And this is the point we made everywhere we went, that there's a difference between journalists and activists. And at the same time, every country in the world, the first preoccupation of that country is the preservation of the people. So, yes, once in a while, there might be need to draw that, there might be that very delicate balance between national security and the freedom of the press or the freedom of the individual. But I make bold to say That is one of the freest country to live in the world. I know you spoke about the freedom and human rights. Yes, it is true that we, especially in this ministry, we've watched with some trepidation the social media front. And we've seen how some people have tried to abuse the new technology to cause disaffection, especially pushing fake news and hate speech. In a country where you have many religions, many ethnicities, many ethnic groups, many values, the government cannot fold its arms and see some unguided individuals trying to take advantage of the differences in values to cause disharmony. And this is why this ministry in particular decided that it is important to sanitize the social media, scene. Sanitization does not necessarily mean legislation, and it does not mean by any imagination stifling of the press or the media. No. We are going to have a media as free as anywhere in the world, but we are must have a responsibly free media. And that's our goal. Hate speech, fake news, disinformation have done more to destabilize the globe than any plague in recent times. And there are examples abound within Nigeria and outside Nigeria. Outside Nigeria, the classic case is Rwanda genocide, where over 800,000 lives were lost within a short period, just through hate speech, false news, fake news, and disinformation. So our attempt to sanitize the social media is not at all an attempt to stifle the media. I want to make this very clear. If we want to stifle the media, or we want to violate anybody's human rights, we're not going to call the same stakeholders, human rights, media, to a round table conference on how do we go about sanitizing the social media. Because as we speak today, we'll be meeting later in the month with leaders of the media, civil society, security, and other stakeholders on how do we sanitize our social media? How do we make our social media safe for all? How do we ensure that people do not weaponize the social media to cause, disharmony in the country? So that is all that is about our social media regulation. It's not about stifling the media. It's not about, violating anybody's human rights, but it's our own response to irresponsible social media. And we're not alone in this. I know that France, I know that the UK, I know Pakistan, China, Japan, all have, in one way or the other, tried to regulate the social media without necessarily tampering with the freedom of the of any individual or the media. And just like a parliamentarian said in France, he says whatever is not tolerated on the streets should not be tolerated online, which is the reverse of what the ambassadors spoke about human rights. So we are very concerned, we are very committed about sanitizing the social media. Now, I said at the beginning of this address that you have come actually to preach to the converted, because just before we came in our private meeting, you expressed the fears of for exactly what the world is going through disinformation, fake news, and hate speech. And I want to say here that long before it became popular, this administration, using this ministry, started fighting hate speech and fake news. We started in 2017, and we devoted an entire national conference on information to address the issue of hate speech, because we saw it very early that it is probably the biggest threat the unity of this country will face. We've also, since 2018, launched a national campaign on fake news by going to various news organizations, media houses, and signing them on to join us in our fight against fake news. And interestingly enough, when I was discussing with the Ambassador for Innovation, he says another aspect which bothers, the Freedom Online Coalition is the deliberate denial online about the existence of climate change. And I say that is strange to us here, because we are the victims of climate change. But the victims of climate change, not just because it affects, our environment, but it affects not just the environment, it affects our economy. It affects the peace and stability of the country. It affects social interaction. You look at Lake Chad, about 50 years ago, it covered 25,000 square kilometers and supported livelihood in 7 countries: Central African Republic, Nigeria, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Benin Republic, and so on. But today, the same Lake Chad has shrunk by 90%. And that means that all those about 20 to about 50 million lives that were dependent on the Lake Chad now have to look elsewhere for sustenance. And part of the conflict we witnessed in Nigeria, which was herdsmen, farmers clash, was directly also traceable to the dwindling water level in the Lake Chad. Because it meant then that those pastoralists that, dependent on the Lake Chad to rear their cattle had to move elsewhere in south, and in the process there was this conflict. So for us in Nigeria, climate change is real, because it's affecting our economy, it's affecting our environment, it's affecting our politics and our stability. And we would join hands with the frontline, with Freedom Online Coalition to ensure that those denialists on climate change, that we tackle them robustly, because we have been victims of climate change, and we know it is real. Of course, we established the fact that our creative industry, especially the film and music industry, the film, music, fashion, photography, and innovative technology are the fastest moving, sector of our economy. And today, the film industry alone, the creative industry alone employs over 1 million people, contributing about 1.4% of our GDP. But we look forward to next 2-3 years, where another 1.5 million people will be employed by the same sector, and will be able to contribute about 3.5% to the GDP. But the most important thing about our creative industry is its ability to employ more people. Like I said, after agriculture, it employs the largest number of people and mostly the young elements. And this is a great country for anybody to come and invest in the creative industry. But in 2014, we had just about 23 cinema houses. Today we have about 51. Today we have about 100 screens. But a population of 200 million people, we need a minimum of 1,000 cinema houses and about 16,000 screens. So this is an area where we're looking for investment, and investors would actually just smile to the bank. Our music industry has also grown, amazingly, from $23 million, revenue in 2014, and by 2021, 2023, we're looking to about $86 million in revenue. Our fashion industry is probably one of the most expansive in the world. That's another area that we can, we look forward to collaboration from other countries. So once again, I welcome the two ambassadors. I pledge our preparedness to work with the Freedom Online Coalition, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with you in your fight against disinformation, and in your fight against fake news, and in your fight against hate speech. I thank you very much.